but we could be alone. Between city lights, we don't have to hide. I wanna go, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? I can't understand why we can't hold hands, but they don't know what we have is real love. Aren't you sick and tired of having to hide? I know a place, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the live stream. I'm so happy to have you here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, or Sunday evening, I suppose, if it's... You guys don't know that I missed the table, but I'll know. Hold on. Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, if you are overseas, if you're in a different time zone, or maybe a Monday morning, if you're one of them wackos in Australia or near there. Right. Welcome to Livestream, everybody. So glad to have you. And I'm very glad to be here with you. I had debated whether to do the Livestream low-key lighting in the middle of the day, but I decided I would because I'm trying to, I really like that. I really like that lighting. Somebody's telling me that Tweet FPV is lighting he's got live stream lighting that I should check out. So let's look at this. So first of all, hang on. Here's my lighting. Oh, what have I done? Oh God, what a travesty. Wait. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Okay. Whew. No. That's not what we're going for. That's what we're going for. Okay. So that's my lighting. And now, I haven't looked yet. This is what Tweet FPV's got going on. Let's see. What has he got going on? Let's full screen it so we can get a closer look. So, yeah. All right, so let's just focus on his lighting here, first of all. He's got a much more subdued, like a down key lighting than mine. Very dark room, key light on him, highlights in the background, super super out of focus though. So it's almost, I feel like it's almost like there's all this dead space right over here, right? Right? So I would like to see the composition be more balanced with something filling this negative space. Does he change it throughout the stream? We got a different, oh, here's a different setup. This I like better. He's more centered. He's got the light up quad. This is a little better. Still a little imbalanced, but like I would say that if you're going to have yourself in the center, then you would want a balanced composition left to right. Whereas if you were going to have an imbalanced composition, you would want yourself off center and then the imbalance on the other side. I mean, that's just me. People are telling me you can change the color of the light with the live stream. That's kind of cool. Yeah, you can play with his little light up quad. Yeah. Interesting. That's just me. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. It's just as a thinking like as a and then the other thing that I am not a fan of putting the hey, what? I get frustrated and swallow the fish hooks too often? Oh. I'm not a fan of putting the chat in the video. I know people, because you can always go back and just look at the live stream chat. You should be able to. Where's this? Why can't I see his live stream chat? Okay, maybe not. Why are there two Videolytics as well? Anyway, pretty cool though. Interactive chat. I'm a fan of it. But that's not why you're here. You're not here to talk about Tweet FPV. You're here to talk about me. That's right. Me, Joshua Bardwell. And I'm here to talk about you. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm a little bit late this week because I was actually about 2 hours away from home. I was in Hot Springs, North Carolina, if anybody knows where that is. It's a little stop on the way to on the Appalachian Trail. And spent the weekend up there and did a tiny amount of hiking and sat in a hot spring and, you know, the things you do. And then got, left and drove home and just barely got home in time for the stream. But you know I wasn't going to pass you guys out. Here's the deal. Here's what we got going on. Are you new here? By the way, if you are new here, say hello. Welcome. Someone, Upshot, thank you, Morton Upshot, for clarifying. Morton Upshot says you get distracted by trolls too often. It's so hard to not do that. Believe me, I don't get distracted. Believe me, I actually resist the urge to get fish hooked by trolls more often than you think. But it's really hard. Here's what's going on. Welcome, Wingman. Welcome. Welcome, Mechanicarn. Is there a delay on the audio? I don't know. I don't see why there would be. I'm going to guess it's you, but I'm not sure. Oh, Tweet FPV here in the chat. Tweet, I'm going to tag you as a moderator. Just so you show up in blue. A fellow live streamer. Here's what's going on, folks. Oh, hang on. Oh, there we go. Hello. I'm going to be taking your questions here in the chat. Like this question from Natter18. What do you think is a good upgrade path after buying a ready-to-fly kit? Hang on a second. We're gonna put that on screen. Just a second. We're going to tag that. And then we'll answer that question. So I'll be answering your questions here in the chat. If you want to make sure that I get your question, hit the $ right down here. Leave a super chat. I'll be reading these a little later in the stream. And thank you also to these beautiful people on the right side of my stream. Here, let's zoom in on them. No. This is what I meant to do. Let's zoom in on them and give them... No. Sheesh. There we go. Hey, these are my patrons in the Discord server. Oh yeah, shake it. Give me those sweet animated images whose name I will not say for fear of starting another damn argument over how to pronounce the word. These guys are my patrons. If you want to join the Discord server, I see the question there, ID 10 Tango. The Discord is for patrons only. It's one of the few things I require. You got to give them something exclusive. I'll still answer all your emails and all your questions, but the Discord, if you want to join it, join my Patreon. Link in the video description. Okay. So the first question we're going to start with today is, Natter18, what do you think is a good upgrade path after buying a ready-to-fly kit? So you bought a ready-to-fly quad, fine. Am I going to assume that you bought goggles? Do you have goggles and a controller? I see. Let's say that you bought a whole ready-to-fly kit. I understand. You've bought a whole ready-to-fly kit like the Eachine, like the Emax Tiny Hawk or the Beta FPV Cetus. So you've got a quadcopter, a set of goggles, and a controller, and all three of them are probably kind of crappy. Okay? So I think the best upgrade path depends on what you bought. Like, if you buy the... let me put it up on stream here. Let me put an image up just so we're all on the same page, and because people like images. So if you start with something like the Emax Tiny Hawk Ready to Fly, okay? Like the Tiny Hawk 2 RTF kit with controller and goggles. Okay, let's say you started with this. This is a very good quadcopter. Like, this is just a good quadcopter. There is no reason to rush to upgrade and get a better quadcopter because the Tiny Hawk 2 Freestyle is solid. Like, people would just buy it and fly it, right? So then the question is, should you upgrade the goggles or should you upgrade the controller first? And that's going to depend on which of them is weaker in your particular ready-to-fly kit. Some people would say that this controller will get the job done and you should upgrade the goggles first so you have a better visual experience. Other people will say that having a better visual experience and better range, because a better set of goggles with a better module will give you better range, is going to give you better experience and you should just live with the controller. Like, I would say with the Emax controller is, like, the gimbals are pretty poor. It's really like a toy grade gimbal. I hope I'm not offending anybody at Emax, but like these gimbals are more toy grade. I think with this particular kit, I would upgrade the controller first, and I would live with the goggles. On the other hand, let's look at the. What about the Beta FPV Cetus? So the Beta FPV Cetus, I feel like this controller is fairly passable if you get one that doesn't have like wire. Like, some of them had problems where the wiring on the gimbals would break off inside and then it would stop working. So I feel like the controller's fairly passable, and I might upgrade the goggles first. Okay. The real answer is, what I think the best thing for you to do is buy a bind and fly kit with a decent quadcopter. Like the Emax kits are pretty good. And then from there, upgrade the goggles and the controller kind of at the same time. But if you buy one, like the Beta FPV Cetus, you will outgrow every single thing in that kit. Now, the Cetus is cool because the quadcopter has some rudimentary altitude hold, and it may be a little bit easier to learn to fly. So maybe that's a trade-off worth... It's only $160 for the whole kit. Yeah, that's what I would say. Athix wonders, what about option 3, sell the kit and reinvest in new stuff? I mean, how much are you going to get for that kit, really? Like, I feel like it's very... hazardous to buy used FPV gear because the condition can vary so wildly. Like a set of goggles, as you know, they're probably fine, right? They're not going to get damaged. But a quadcopter especially could be beat to hell. It could be almost new. It's tough. Ghost Branch FPV in the Discord is saying he thinks having a decent radio is the best starting point. That a decent radio that you can use with simulators is going to hold you back more than having like goggles that are less than the best. Okay. Jelmer Hemstra wants to know, are you interested in doing Cinelifter content? Like building them. Here's the thing. Here's the reason I haven't done more Cinelifter content. Because, like, I did my X class build, right? Which is kind of like, or Beast class rather. That's kind of like Cinelifter content. The thing is, the Cinelifters are being used by professionals to do things that I don't do. So, I mean, I could do a tutorial about how to build a Cinelifter. But then what? I don't have a red Komodo to put on it, or a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema to put on it. And if I did, what am I going to do with it? It would be a disservice to a Cinelifter to then just go and, like, fly it around my house. That's not what they're made to do. Like, if you gave me a red digital camera, would I be qualified to review it? No. I would just be, I'm not the intended audience, and I don't have the intended use case for that equipment. Now, obviously, the chasm is not as wide with a Cinelifter, because at its heart, a Cinelifter is a quadcopter. So I could build one. I could do a build tutorial. But then what? Is what I ask myself. The companies making Cinelifters would love for me to do videos about them and review them. And I have resisted that because at the end of the day, I feel like without the input of someone who is actually using it on a set, I don't feel qualified to review them. Because I don't know. I don't know what the actual goal is. Obviously, the goal is to get footage, but like, are there going to be problems that come up that I don't anticipate because I'm not actually using them on a set? And so then I go, well, the other question is how much audience is there going to be for it? You know, ultimately, I want to make content that helps people and that people want to see. And to some degree, Cinelifter content is extremely niche. It's less niche than I would have thought. More people are flying Cinelifters than I would have thought. But at the end of the day, probably relatively few people would do it. Now, Nurk has Cinelifter content. Wrong Way FPV points out, Nurkula has Cinelifter content. Yeah, Nurkula flies Cinelifters for his day job, right? So the Cinelifter content he is making is a byproduct of the fact that he is already flying Cinelifters, right? And Nurk is the right person to make content about Cinelifters because he is actually using them on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I go back and forth because I don't want to kind of just lock myself in a box of I only do 5-inch freestyle content. I don't think that's not the right thing to do. But I also want to make sure I'm making content where I'm actually an authority and not making content that's just bullshit. Yeah. Skytex. That's a hard question. Skytex asks, do you think it's possible to maintain 160 miles an hour with a 7-inch quad for 60 seconds? Whew. That's tough. So let's think that through. 160 miles an hour is there. When you think about going fast, the faster you go, the harder it is to go even faster than that. Because wind resistance increases exponentially. Okay, it's nonlinear. So, and wind resistance is the main thing that stops you from going faster, all right? Once you get above, say, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, okay? I'm talking mostly about a quadcopter, but it applies to cars, too. Think about it. A Honda Civic like a little 180 horsepower commuter car, if you just put the pedal down and go in a straight line, you could go 90 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour, maybe even 100 miles an hour, no problem. It is easy to go 80, 90, 100 miles an hour in a car. And then performance cars can get into the 130, 140, 150. You'll see guys with their BMWs on the Autobahn doing 150 miles an hour, right? So, but somewhere between 150 miles an hour and like 200 miles an hour, it gets very, very hard to go that fast, to the point where to break 200 miles an hour, you've got something. I don't know what the actual speed record for the Bugatti Veyron is, but the Bugatti Veyron at one time had the top speed record for cars, for production cars, maybe. Apologies to the auto enthusiasts for whom I'm getting some of the details wrong. And the top speed was somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 miles an hour. And I watched a video where James May took the Bugatti Veyron on a banked oval track. He took the Bugatti Veyron to its top speed, and it's just this slow climb to 200 miles an hour. And the Bugatti Veyron it's like a 12-cylinder with dual turbos or quad turbos. It's like a 1,200 horsepower. It's so much more than a car that can go 150 miles an hour. So let's bring it back to quadcopters and stop talking about cars here, okay? The point is that for a quadcopter to go 100 miles an hour is not that challenging. And for a 5-inch quad to hit 150 or 160 is actually like 3 times more challenging or 4 times more challenging than to go 100. And then to sustain that for 60 seconds is even harder, because like the battery is going to sag. So you may peak at 160 miles an hour and then slowly sag down. So it's pretty challenging. It's pretty challenging. Now, you say, do you believe it's possible to maintain 160 miles an hour with a 7-inch for 60 seconds? It's probably possible to do almost anything. But the other challenge you're putting before yourself is that larger props and larger quads actually are worse at top speed runs, which may seem there's a sweet spot where the quad has a big enough prop to make enough thrust to go fast, but it's small enough that it doesn't have as much surface area to create drag. And larger props actually spin at a lower RPM. And so larger props are more efficient and make more thrust, but actually larger props can be worse at top speed runs compared to smaller props. So now what you'll have going for you is that a larger prop and a larger quadcopter can carry a bigger battery. So what I would say, Skytex, is, so first of all, Skytex, look for someone else who's done a 7-inch top speed build. Okay? That's the first thing you look for. And if you find somebody else who's already done it, you steal their work, right? You copy their homework. And then the other thing you do is you're going to need to find the right balance between a high pitch prop that can give you the kind of thrust you need, but also a lower pitch prop that can reach the kind of RPM you need. Everybody I know who does top speed runs tests as many props as they can, and the prop that actually produces the highest top speed is sometimes counterintuitive. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need a big enough motor with a high enough kV to generate the RPM that you need. So start by saying 160 miles an hour divided by my propeller pitch. How many RPM do I need as a starting point to go 160 miles an hour? And your motor kV needs to be at least, you see what I'm saying? If your propeller pitch is you need to know the advance ratio of the propeller, which is theoretically how far forward in the air it would go if it was just a screw. And if your advance ratio times your RPM doesn't equal 160 miles an hour, you will not go 160 miles an hour. In reality, it's going to need to be more than 160 miles an hour because there's losses. So, Ghost Branch says, in my own experience, whatever top speed a quad can achieve, minus 10%, it can maintain for at least 60 seconds if you have a fresh battery and don't care if it's dead afterwards. Based on that metric, you would need to be targeting 170 or 175 mile an hour peak speed. Yeah. Sebby D, I do have your super chat. It's still in the super chats. Don't worry. Now, Ghost Branch actually says we've got 160 miles an hour here. Is this... Well, this is an airplane, though, not a quad. Yeah, that's an airplane, not a quad. That's going to be something completely different. I think that you will find it's extremely challenging for a quadcopter to hit 160 miles an hour for a minute, and more challenging with a 7-inch. Lizovsky, thanks for this. Thanks for this prop speed calculator. Let's play with this for a second. I'm going to get to the super chats. Oops, sorry. I'm going to get to the super chats next, but let's just, I kind of want to keep playing with this. So the other thing, I think you're going to want, Ghost Bridge, that wasn't your link? Oh, sorry, that was Cycling Mikey. Ghost Branch, if you've got a link of somebody who did it, let me know. The other thing I think you're going to want is you're going to want a much higher voltage. So you're going to be on like 12S. I feel like that's where you're going to want to be. 12S, 80% motor load, sure. Cell voltage at RPM. Oh, I can't work backwards to the kV though. Let's say it's a 7x4 propeller. Cell voltage at RPM. Let's say our cell voltage drops to 3.8 times 12 is going to be 45.6 volts. And we need the kV and the RPM. Shoot, I'm not going to do that math. I thought this would be easier. I don't want to have to, I want to tell it, I want to go 160 miles an hour and have it work backwards to give me the RPM and the kV. Yeah. Alrighty. That's how I would do it, though. Ooh, what do we got here? Hang on. So this is the Catalyst Machine Works 165 mile an hour. What Cannonball, is that going to be a... That's a 5-inch, though. That's a 5-inch. Yeah. Lizovsky, what do you mean use motor load? Use standard calculation. Estimated motor load. Get results. What happens if I hit get results? No. I didn't give it a kV. It wants me to give it the kV. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Let's move on. Thank you so much for that interesting question, Skytex. I appreciate that. Let's get some of these super chats out of the way. Thank you so much, Callie FPV. Let's see if you're still in the chat, Callie. No, you've rolled off the chat, I'm sorry to say. Callie FPV, thank you for a $10 super chat. Just want to say thanks for spending another Sunday here with us. I'm very happy to do it. Thank you guys for spending another Sunday here with me. Sebby D FPV, thanks for a 20 Canadian dollar. Really appreciate that. Generous donation, Sebby D. I'm looking for a 3D printer to provide our crew with easy access to 3D prints. Any recommendations or suggestions under $400? I'm looking at the Creality Ender 3v2 right now. Okay, Sebby D. This is a great question, and I'm going to try and keep it as concise as I can because the answer is actually really simple. If you like to tweak and play and mess with settings and maybe mess with hardware, then the Ender 3 V2 is a fantastic choice. If you're lucky and you catch them on sale, you can find them around $200. That leaves you a healthy amount in your $400 budget to upgrade in any way you think. However, an Ender 3 can print perfectly adequately out of the box with no hardware upgrades. Just got to go a little bit slower, especially if you're using TPU, which you probably are if you're printing for drones. So there you go. If you want as close to a print and forget experience as possible, then you want to look at the Prusa line. Prusa, now the Prusa Mark III is like $700, but the Prusa Mini, let's just check the price on that. Make sure it's in your budget. I think it is, though. The Prusa Mini is $350 There you go. Stop. I'm gonna just go away. $350 for the kit, which you will assemble. The main thing you give up with the Prusa Mini is that you have a much smaller build volume than the Ender 3. But if what you're printing is quadcopter stuff, like antenna mounts, camera mounts, arm skids, almost anything that you're going to need to print for like a 5-inch to a 7-inch or maybe even a little bigger, you're probably going to be able to print it on the Prusa Mini. So I think that there are people, and you look at the Prusa Mini and you go, well, it's only got a single Z-axis. It doesn't have a supported Z-axis. But the bottom line is Prusa just knows what the F they're doing and makes really, really good hardware that just freaking works. So if you don't want to screw around, I mean, it's 3D printing. You're going to have to screw around. Okay? But if you want the minimum amount of screwing around and the closest to a just print and forget situation, the Prusa Mini is the way to go. If you want to tweak and play, the Ender 3 is the way to go. And there's other low-cost 3D printers out there than the Ender 3, but a reason to choose the Ender 3, and you mentioned it specifically, is that it's so widely used that there's just so many resources for it. Now, other people are going to say, like Gingerflow says, the Artillery Genius is the best bang for the buck. Not going to lie. It might be. I like the Sovol SVO1. I think it's very good. But you specifically mentioned the Ender. And the appeal of the Ender is there's so much resources out there. Anything you want to do to improve it or build it, there's going to be a tutorial. And, I think that has some value. Yeah. AFGG, thanks you for 25. I believe it's Polish Sloty. Thank you so much. No question. And another 749. No question again. Let me check the chat and make sure you didn't ask a question in the chat. I don't see any question there from you. So thank you for your generous donations. And Cycling Mikey, thank you for £5. Again, no question. Appreciate that. We are caught up on the super chats. Fantastic. Blazeby says, my work, I have a print farm for work, and it's all Ender 3s, not Prusas, as Prusas have their own issues. I know Prusas aren't perfect. Prusa? I know they're not perfect. Nothing is perfect. It's a 3D printer. It's going to be a pain in the ass. But, I mean, I feel like the general consensus is that Prusa solves a lot of problems that plague beginners and give you the closest to a print and forget experience. That's my understanding. I don't have one. I've resisted the urge to buy one. Jelmer Hemstra wants to know, is there a review of the HC0 1-watt VTX coming? Yes. It just came. I received it on Friday. And then I went to Hot Springs and I hiked all weekend. And I say I hiked all weekend. I went on one hike. It was about a 2-mile hike. And then I spent the rest of the weekend hanging around the Airbnb and sitting in the hot tub. But I didn't review the 1-watt VTX. So. But it's coming. It is coming. Masiak Cesars. I have a feeling I'm not saying your name right. Masiak asks, would you upgrade the SkyZone O2X for the DJI V2 or better analog goggles? That's an unfair question It's an unfair question because, look, if you are upgrading from an analog goggle to DJI, you are making a fundamental shift. You're now flying digital, right? You have switched. That's like saying, would you upgrade your Android phone to an Apple phone? Yes, they're both phones, but you've switched ecosystems, right? And there's more to that decision than I'm gonna just get a new set of goggles. So, would you upgrade your SkyZone? Would you upgrade your analog goggle to DJI? That's the first question. And if the answer to that question is yes, then there's no question. Because it's not like, well, should I go to DJI or should I get a better set of, should I get Orcas? You could get the best analog goggles in the world, and it's still not the same experience as going DJI. They're just different experiences. So, if you have the money to go DJI, I think a lot of people are going to be more happy with DJI than with analog. The main reason that people don't go DJI is that it's more expensive. It may not be available in their area. If you're a racer, you may be more concerned about the latency and the weight. If you are really into micros, you may be concerned about the weight. These are sort of the main reasons, just off the top of my head, why people sort of steer away from DJI. You may just not like DJI as a company. There are people out there who feel that way. I want to acknowledge that. You may want a more open ecosystem, like HD0 and analog are a little more open. But if you're asking this question, then DJI is on the table for you. And if you're asking, should I go DJI or should I keep flying analog? I would say that I would pick DJI over the best analog goggles every freaking time if DJI was an option. That's my opinion. Looks like we got a... That's very interesting. Athix is showing me photos of a frame from eDrone that is designed specifically for the 1 watt VTX. Oh, this is going to be controversial. This is... So I want to say, I'm such a hater, and I apologize to everyone in the world for being a hater. My first reaction to new things is almost always to dislike them. And then maybe I'm wrong and I come around to liking them, but there you go. I am really hesitant about any frame that makes electronics structural. Like the old frames that used to have the PDB as a frame built into the bottom plate. Remember the ZMR 250? They used to do that. Oh my god, I'm going to date myself. ZMR 250 PDB V2. Oh man, you guys. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. Is that it? PDB bottom plate options. The ZMR 250 was one of the early budget carbon fiber frames. And one of the things that was cool, it was so you could have this bottom plate, which was also a built-in PDB, right? And you would solder your this was the OSD. No shit. Here's some voltage regulators that you solder to it. And the problem was, in my experience, you would always end up breaking the PDB. Because if you think about it, your frame plates break, right? Your frame plates take stress, the carbon fiber cracks, and eventually that would happen and you'd lose your PDB. And I came away from this stage of my life in FPV thinking no one should ever make electronics structural. The structural parts should be carbon. The electrical parts should be isolated from the carbon. And I still feel that way. So what we've got here is not quite the same, right? We are taking the 1 watt VTX and we're passing these plates through it. But it sure feels to me like, think about the stress, right? We've got this bolt here. We're going to have stress from an impact pass through here and is going to transmit that stress to the VTX. However, is it soft mounted? If it's soft mounted, that's a little better. Is it that different from the way that we mount? I don't know. Is it that different from the way that we mount electronics anyway? Are we transmitting more stress? Or is it just like fooling me because of the way it's tucked in there? I don't know. I don't know. I'm hesitant, but I'm not convinced I'm right. It's interesting. It is nice to see a frame that's going to protect that big honkin' VTX with carbon. Anyway. Oh, there you go. Isaac M says, I've tried DJI. I didn't see I didn't find the resolution that impressive, honestly. I mean, if you don't think that DJI crushes analog in terms of picture quality and resolution, I would just get your eyes checked. No offense. I mean, maybe you didn't go. Maybe you were like, well, I was expecting 1080 or I was expecting 4K and I only got 720. I mean, it's only 720. I'm not going to argue with you. But it crushes analog. Jeez. There's just no question, especially at 50 megabits per second. Yeah. Samuel Lambert asks, would you suggest, thank you for $5 super chats, Samuel Lambert. Would you suggest the SkyZone Cobra X or the Ishin 200D for a beginner? Thank you for your work. You've helped me so much getting into, I assume you meant FPV, not DPC. Yeah, I think your left hand was just a little off. The Cobra X is a much better goggle than the Ishin 200D. It's also a much more expensive goggle. I feel like the Cobra X is as good as almost any analog goggle on the market in terms of its video reception. It's about $260, I think, which is a lot compared to the Ishin 200D. But if you don't mind a box goggle, the SkyZone Cobra X is one of the best values in analog FPV goggles today. So that's what I would say about that. And the thing is, the next step up is $350 or $400 to get an analog goggle or more. So the Cobra X, if $260, $270 is in your budget and you're okay with a box goggle, the Cobra X is a great choice. Derek and M says, new Fat Shark with built-in HD0 in 1080. I don't know if you're telling me that you're aware of that or you asking me if that's happening. I don't know anything about that. HD0 doesn't do 1080, first of all. It does 720. Oh, Jelmer Hemstra with the big question. If DJI is 720, Jelmer, you've gotten like 3 questions in a row, but they've all been really good questions. So, hey, what can I say? If DJI is 720 and HD0 is 720, why does DJI look better? So, I actually had a discussion with Carl from HD0, and also thank you, Ryan Quellet, for helping set that up. We had a discussion and we talked about this. And so, first of all, like, let me, hang on a second. Let me make a point. And the point that I'm going to make is that resolution is not resolution. Hang on. Oh, perfect. Here's a thumbnail. Okay, so what's the resolution of this image? Image size. The resolution of this image is 1920 by 1080. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I am going to resample this. How can I do 50? Can I do percent? Yeah. I'm going to resample this down to 25%. Why is that not locked? Okay. Great. I've resampled it to 25%. Do you see the reduced resolution? Okay. Now, image. Image size. I'm going to resample it back up 400%. And it's going to be 1920 by 1080 again. This is a 1920 by 1080 image. Why does it look worse? And the answer is that the resolution of the image doesn't necessarily reflect the amount of information that the image is actually containing. Okay? So when we look at DJI and we look at HD0, and both of them are 720p signals, there is no reason to assume that both of them will have the same amount of actual usable resolution. We could take a 240p signal, up-res it to 720p in the goggles, and then we could up-res it to 1080p. In fact, HD0 has the ability to output a 1080p HDMI signal, but it's still 720p resolution through the air. Okay? So that's the first thing. DJI is carrying more information than HD0. That's the actual answer to your question. HD0 transmits 720p. And by the way, Carl confirmed this. It is transmitting 720p, right? Every pixel is transmitted, 720 by 1280. But the actual amount of information that is sent is reduced. For example, Carl talked about that there is a high-pass filter that the signal goes to reduce, and that is a high-pass filter is a very, very basic form of image compression. It reduces the amount of information in the image. Can you do a high-pass in Photoshop? Can we see what that looks like? How do you do it? Hang on. Sharpen images. A high-pass filter. Or is it a low? I'm sorry, it's a low pass. A high pass is sharpening. Can you do a low pass? Okay, no, it's not trivial to do a low pass, so I'm not going to worry about that. I apologize for misspeaking there. Oh, low pass is just Gaussian blur. Oh, okay, I can do that. Filter. Blur. Well, it's I'm worried I'm misspeaking. Yeah, here's a low pass filter. So as we raise that, we are reducing the amount of image in the detail in the image, and therefore we could transmit that image with less data. So there is a certain amount of filtering that HD0 does, because HD0 does not have the bandwidth that DJI does to transmit data. Okay? Anyway, the takeaway is that although HD0 and DJI are both 720p feeds, they transmit data in different ways, and the net effect is that HD0 cannot carry as much image detail as DJI. But the trade-off there is that DJI has higher latency and inconsistent latency, whereas HD0, one of the reasons HD0 doesn't use the kind of compression that DJI does is that HD0 needs to transmit the data with very low and very predictable latency. So it simply doesn't have the time to do the kind of compression that DJI does that lets DJI have more information. There you go. Good question. I've got this interview that I did with Carl and Ryan, and I haven't edited it and I haven't released it. Maybe I will. I felt like it was a little bit just us sitting down and like talking about it, and it didn't feel structured like an interview, and I wasn't sure I wanted to release it. But there's a couple like really good points in there that I think people would be interested in, so maybe I should get on that. Skytex asks, is the compression also why DJI cuts off at 8 miles? And HD0 goes unlimited. And short answer is yes. So DJI, is it 8 miles? Did they increase that limit? I thought it was 13 kilometers or 4 miles. Was it 8 miles? 13 kilometers to miles. 13 kilometers is 8 miles. I apologize. That's my bad. I don't know how long a kilometer is. So DJI has a bidirectional and what they call a reliable protocol in computer networking. Don't take the word reliable there is being used in a very industry specific way, so it doesn't mean what you think it means colloquially. In computer networking, a reliable protocol means that it will detect lost data and retransmit them. And a unreliable protocol will not detect lost data and will not retransmit it. But an unreliable protocol, if you have a perfect link, a perfect transmission medium, then all of the data will get there. It's just that with an unreliable protocol, if the data doesn't get there, the protocol doesn't care. And you might think, well, wouldn't you always want a reliable protocol? And the answer is that unreliable protocols are good for situations where we need very low latency. If you are live streaming something and you need the lowest possible latency, maybe one way you would think of it is, I'm just going to send the data out there, and if it doesn't get there, we'll just keep going. We'll have a little bit of a dropped frame, and we'll just keep going. That would be an application for an unreliable protocol. DJI is a reliable protocol, and the way that we think it works, we don't know because DJI won't tell us, but the way that we assume it probably works, because this is how it usually works with reliable protocols, is that the data is sequenced. So each packet has a serial number or a sequence number. And so if you're looking at the sequence numbers and they go 1, 2, 3, 5, you know that number 4 was missing. And what will happen then is that either the other device will request the retransmission, or the device will be acknowledging every packet and there'll be a missing acknowledgement for the one that didn't get through, and then it'll be retransmitted. And we think that the reason DJI has a hard limit is that 13 kilometers is the round trip latency of the link is so high that the acknowledgements can't get there in time. And that's why the link fails. That's what we think. Now, HD0 is a non-reliable broadcast protocol. So HD0 simply transmits the packets out there, and if they get there, great, and if they don't get there, I don't care. And because of that, HD0 can go as far as you want. As long as you have enough output power and antenna gain, you'll have a usable link. By the way, I really don't want anybody to say Joshua Bardwell said HD0 is unreliable. I am using the terms reliable and unreliable in a very specific way within the context of computer networking. That means a very specific thing that is completely unrelated to the colloquial use of those terms. So please don't make that mistake. Okay. Yes, it is absolutely akin to TCP versus UDP. If you're familiar with TCP/IP, HD0 is UDP, DJI is TCP. Owen Peaker, it has not got anything to do with an awareness of the home point. It has nothing, because the DJI Air unit doesn't have a GPS in it. The Air unit has no idea how far it is from the goggles. So it can't be an arbitrary limit based on GPS, because there isn't GPS. It has to be something internal to the protocol itself. All right. Good question. Good question. FPV Bangalore. Good question. That's a good question. It's a great live stream today, folks. FPV Bangalore. Oh my God. FPV Bangalore. I was just about to answer your question, and then I see this nonsense. Really? Gracious sakes, Bangalore. You don't have to ask the question 50 times. Okay, that's only like 5, but take it easy. Don't spam the chat. I'm going to answer your question, though. I'm using a long-range antenna, but just after 500 meters, I'll experience breakup. Why is that? Too many variables to really answer your question. So let's think about it, and let's work through it. If your antenna is a high-gain antenna, it will be very directional. If you are not facing the higher the gain, the more directional it is. Which means if you've got a very high-gain antenna and you're not facing your quad dead on, you're going to get bad signal. That's a possibility. You also could have a crappy, busted video transmitter. It would be a good idea to check the output power of your video transmitter. You could have a damaged antenna. These are some things it could be, but the real answer is that there's a lot of variables, and it's not trivial to just pick one of them. Also, I'll give you one more, FPV Bangalore. A small amount of breakup is normal, even when signal is very high. So if you are inexperienced with analog video transmitters, you may be seeing a normal amount of breakup and thinking, oh God, what's wrong? And the real answer is that you can fly really far out and still get a little bit of breakup. So Nick FPV wants to know, what's the best right-handed patch out there, preferably one that outperforms the included patches with the Attitude V6? I should say that the patch antenna that comes with the Attitude V6 is not terrible. Like, it's not like great, but it certainly isn't terrible. Now, if you want recommendations for products, I would suggest you go to fpvknowitall.com, which is my website. And we'll go to the Ultimate FPV shopping list, and we'll go to the section for goggles and antennas. And we'll look for directional antennas. These are the ones I suggest. They're not the only good ones. There are other good ones out there, but these are the ones I personally like. The True RC X-Air would be a good choice. The VAS, the Video Aerial Systems, what do they call it? The Pepper Box is another good one. That's not on the list. Think about why, but the Pepper Box is a good one. The Crosshair Extreme, that's another good one. Those are good choices. I should let you guys know, I'm happy to let you know that I always struggle with keeping the shopping list up to date. It's as fast as products come out, it's very challenging. I have just started a weekly conference call. I don't know what. I'm now officially a manager. I'm running conference calls. I've started a weekly conference call where I'm working with a team to try to keep this up to date. Hold on a second. So I have some to-do items. I got to get on them before the next conference call. I have some to-do items. Stuff that needs to be added to the page. Stuff that maybe needs to be removed. And I would say I'm looking for a way to involve the community more widely, because one of the biggest challenges is just kind of having your arms around everything in FPV. Like, and it's very difficult to say, oh, there's this new product. No, those aren't the best goggles anymore. Cygnus asks, how often do you update your website? Well, the thing is, Cygnus, like every week, Cygnus, why is your comment not showing up? Do we need to reload this page? Is Discord not showing up? How often do you update? There it is. The thing is, I provide updates every week, but any given page may not be updated for a month or maybe more. And now sometimes that's because, like, I don't just update the website because a new product is out. I would rather have like 5 solid choices than put some new product on just because it's hot and then it turns out to have a problem. And then if you look at goggles, the world of goggles doesn't change very often. The best goggle that you should buy is kind of, so the last time goggles really got shaken up, analog goggles, was the Orca FPV Pilot. But before the Orca FPV Pilot, for a year, the goggles you should think about buying are the same. But I really would like to, I'm looking for ways to involve people more. Like maybe I could put some kind of a feedback link on the page. I don't know. I got to think about it. So I am thinking about it. The other thing is that I really want to get more, like we have sub 250 gram. We don't have tiny whoops. We don't have Cinewhoops. Like I really like to get toothpicks, tiny whoops, and Cinewhoops in as their own category. But I feel like if I can't keep these pages up to date, then I'm not going to go and try and add more. So that's what I'm working on. Yeah. Thank you, FPV Bangalore, for the kind words. Samuel Lambert wants to know. Samuel Lambert wants to know. Nope. Thank you for a $5 super chat, Samuel Lambert. Would you suggest the Sky Zone Cobra X? Oh no, Samuel, that's not a new super chat. I apologize. I already read that chat. Cycling Mikey asks, I had an unexpected lawn mowing incident, and now 2 of the motors have more friction than I think that they should. Any tips? So Mikey, the first question you got to figure out is, did you break the motors or do they just have gunk in them? The way to get the gunk out of the motors is just to kind of go and it works its way out. But if you find that the motor is bound up, especially at like one particular spot, you could have just bent the motor and then you got to replace it. Interesting. Nobody but somebody, thanks for a €2 super chat. Thoughts about the upgrade to HD0 or DJI for freestyle? I think that for general flying and freestyle, DJI is an extremely solid option. The main reasons that you would choose HD0 are it has better latency, more consistent latency, but I'm not convinced that most freestyle pilots are going to benefit from the latency of HD0 as much as they'll benefit from the improved picture and resolution of DJI. That's my hot take. And the cost is not actually that different. HD0, a lot of people want to support HD0 as a company because Carl is actually a part of the FPV community and is listening to us. I think that is one of the most compelling reasons to support HD0 over DJI. DJI kind of could give a crap. Like canvas mode, no, don't have it. HD0 supports Betaflight OSD. So I think the reason you're going to choose HD0 is because you believe in HD0 as a company and Carl as a person. You want to support that. The actual performance of the system, if you're exclusively picking based on the performance of the system, I think you're going to pick DJI. GMI Visuals. How much is the HD0 VTX? It's $100 for the VTX. Oh, I see. Yeah, so GMI Visuals points out the HD0 VTX is more expensive than the Vista. And I was like, no, the Vista is $130, $160. The HD0 is $100. But the HD0 doesn't include a camera. So you also have to buy a camera, which is another $50. Like, how much is a Cadix Vista? $165. It's close. It's close. I think you pay $50 for an HD0 camera. Yeah. The other thing that we got to, and Mouse FPV touches on this. The other thing we got to point out is that currently DJI is far more available. Currently, HD0 is manufacturing basically all of their cameras and VTXs in-house. And HD0 would love, I assume, for someone else to manufacture this stuff. HD0 would love for RunCam to start making HD0 cameras, and for Rush to make HD0 VTXs. But nobody's doing that. So currently there are these long stretches where you can't buy HD0. Like currently you still can't buy HD0 goggle modules, the receiver modules. They're just not available, and there's an unknown time frame until they will be available. Not to say that DJI hasn't had its own problems. There was a long stretch where DJI Cadix Vista was out of stock. But in general, I think DJI does a better job fulfilling stock than HD0. You gotta really believe in the HD0 system and want to support it to choose it today. Unless the places where HD0 I think objectively excels are as in racing. In racing, the latency of HD0, the picture quality is good enough. You're not ever flying too far away, so the output power, range, and penetration is not an issue, and the latency is exceptional. Not just the low latency, but smooth. The way it draws the images is smoother. So for racing, HD0, also HD0 uses standard raceband channels and works with existing timing systems. DJI requires some work and sometimes doesn't work reliably for racing. So for racing, HD0 all the way. For micros, HD0 all the way. It's lighter, can be made smaller. There's a new Tiny Whoop of FC flight controller coming out with built-in VTX. For micros, HD0 all the way. For almost anything else, if you're only basing it on the performance of the system, I think DJI is a clear winner. But there are a lot of people out there who still want to support what HD0 is doing because they actually hear the community and listen and want to provide products that we care about and like, as opposed to being like, here's our new product, take it or leave it. Madhukar Hola wants to know, do you see DJI releasing further versions of FPV system, perhaps with better cameras? I heard a leak saying that the DJI FPV Mini is coming, which surprised the hell out of me. And the source of the leak is a pretty reliable leaker on Twitter or wherever. He said there was 80% likely that the DJI FPV Mini comes out in the next few months. That would convince me that DJI had not given up on the FPV market. Jekyll Jekli asks, what performance are you talking about? HC0 does better on a lot of metrics. What metrics are you talking about? Tell me the metrics you're talking about. The metrics I'm talking about are resolution, image detail, range, and penetration, which are the metrics that I think most people are concerned about. Now, there are people who say HC0 has more range than DJI because DJI caps out at 13 kilometers and HC0 can keep going if you have a high gain antenna. Okay. If you, I'll stipulate that if you want to fly more than 13 kilometers away from yourself, DJI is not for you. Okay. I think that is an extremely limited use case. I don't think a lot of people are doing that. What metrics does HC0 do better than DJI? I'm not saying they don't exist. I want to know what you're thinking of. Number of quads in the air. DJI can get 8 in the air on 25 megabits per second. Absolutely can. Rotor Riot did it. Latency, I have mentioned that repeatedly. OSD is not really a performance metric, is it? That's like a feature. That's not a performance metric. Range is firmly in the corner of HC0. No, it isn't. I disagree with you there, Jekli, or Jekyll, or I apologize for how I'm saying your name. HC0 does not win on range unless you're flying long range, which very few people are. I will grant you that. For the typical person who is flying proximity freestyle, park cruising, which makes up a huge percentage of pilots, DJI is going to have better range and penetration. DJI goes to 1200 milliwatts, HC0 goes to 1 watt, and watt for watt, DJI does better. Range and penetration are the same thing. I'm sorry to say. Jekli says penetration is with DJI, range isn't. Range and penetration are the same thing. The same characteristics that give a radio link better range also give it better penetration through almost all obstacles. The physics are the same. There are a few exceptions to that rule. For example, 2.4 gigahertz is particularly absorbed by water. So the atmosphere doesn't tend to have a lot of water in it. So in a 2.4 gigahertz frequency band, you can get a ton of penetration, a ton of range through the atmosphere, but very poor penetration through objects that have a lot of water in them. Okay, that's an exception. In general, though, setting aside specific absorption peaks like that, where the material that is the RF signal is passing through is particularly attenuated, in general, the exact same characteristics that make you have better range also make you have better penetration. The difference is that when you go through the atmosphere, the signal drops off very slowly and in a sort of a predictable way. When you go through an object, the signal drops off abruptly, but the same thing happens. And since HC0 and DJI both use 5.8 gigahertz, that factor doesn't really differentiate them. Yeah. I'm not saying there's no reason to choose HC0. I'm explicitly saying that there are reasons to choose it. But when you sit down and you ask, I'm going to just go fly, the basic thing you want is the ability to see where you're going for a long time. And DJI delivers that better than HC0. Family Guyver asks, will a DJI signal work through soil and grass like flying through a short 10-foot cave? All of these signals have extremely limited penetration through earth. So if you fly into the mouth of a cave, you may be able to fly back out. But as soon as you go around a corner, you're probably going to lose signal. Paul McDonald, I do not believe DJI does any sort of beam forming, but I couldn't be 100% sure. That's purely image quality. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. The ability to... What is the most basic thing that an FPV system does? It lets you see where your quad is going. Everything else is secondary, I think. Everything else is secondary. If the system has... If the point where I cannot see where I'm going is closer to me, then that is worse, right? And that's not to say that latency doesn't matter. Latency does matter. And as I've said, if you're extremely latency sensitive for an application like racing, HD0 wins. But most people aren't. That's my opinion. All right, enough beating this horse. Sorry, horses. It's a very insensitive... Beating a dead horse. That's very insensitive to horses. Faid asks, hey, after I updated to Betaflight 4.3, my CPU load is at 30%. Please help. Don't worry about it. Betaflight 4.3 calculates CPU load in a more accurate way, and the effect is that you see a higher number. Nothing has really changed. So it used to be in Betaflight 4.2, if your CPU load was over like 50%, then you should be concerned. And the typical number you would see would be like 5 or 10%, or maybe a little more. In Betaflight 4.3, the typical number might be 30 or 40%, but you can run it as high as 75 or 80% with no problem. Why did they change it? I don't know. They've redone the percentages, though. The percentages are more accurate, and the takeaway is you can run them closer to 100% without a problem. Durel Kodrut Patraska points out the reason that he doesn't choose DJI is lack of audio transmission. He likes to use the earbud. HD0 also doesn't have audio transmission, though, so that's not a differentiator. That keeps you on analog. Krithby says, and it is Krithby, I'm not lisping it. Krithby says, I wish there was an open standard digital system. Yes, there is. It's called OpenHD. It has its own issues, but it does exist. NightRav wants to know, thank you for being a patron, NightRav. If you would like to join NightRav and the other beautiful people over on my Discord server, you can become a patron. There's a link in the video description to my Patreon page. It's basically like throwing a couple bucks into my hat as you walk by watching my videos. For as little as $2 a month or more, if you feel like I've earned it, it's totally up to you the amount that you give. And you can join these beautiful people over on my Discord server. NightRav says, do you have a video on FPV group flying etiquette? I'm a bit worried. I get together with a group now. I've seen a few recent videos of pros stomping on other pilots' transmission. Yes, I do. Let's see if I can find it easily. How do you spell etiquette? Man, I do have a video. I gotta find it for you. FPV channel best practices. That's what I call it. Bingo. Got it. I remember the name. NightRav. Here you go, buddy. That is the best practices. The short version is don't plug in when other people are flying. That's the safest thing you can do. When other people are in the air, don't plug your quad in. Now, if you know what you're doing, you can be a little bit less safe and more careful. But if you're a beginner and you're just worried about not being that guy, Don't plug in while other people are flying at all. Before you plug in, wait till people are down. And you could be like, hey, can I plug in? And then people say, yeah, they're flying. And they're like, yeah, go ahead, plug in. What channel are you on? Be like, you know what? I'm not sure. So I'm just going to wait till you land. And then I'll plug in and we'll check channels, okay? Okay, sure. Everybody lands. You're like, okay, everybody down. Quick plug in. Check your channel. Make sure you are on a different channel from other people and they're not getting interference from you. And then you can go fly. Don't put your powered up quad next to anybody who is flying. So don't land nearby to people within, let's say, 20 feet. Don't land near people. Don't walk up. Don't fly. Don't buzz the flight line. Those are all things that will cause interference. So. Mike Speedy FPV, thank you for £5 in the super chat. And Creative Solutions Digital Marketing, thank you for $42.99 HRK. Can I use the parts from a crashed DJI FPV drone for another drone or sell them part by part? You can move those parts over to another DJI drone as spares, yes. Can you use them outside of the DJI drone? Theoretically, you could transplant them to like a different frame, but they are not, as far as I know, usable outside of the DJI FPV drone. So like you couldn't just transplant the gimbal to a different quad. I don't think that would work. Papa Charlie, thank you for €2. Thoughts on the GEP-RC Mark V HD compared to the Nazgul Evo? I have a GEP-RC Mark V. I really want to get it out and fly it soon, but I'm so busy with other things that it has not been a priority. I honestly have not done a ton of product reviews lately. I've been doing, I don't know, just weird oddball stuff that interests me, but there you go. Probably making less money. But there you go. So here's the GEP-RC Mark V. So the GEP-RC generally, so I have to acknowledge I haven't flown it. Fair enough. GEP-RC generally makes very good bind and fly quads. The GEP-RC Mark IV was exceptionally good. I had some issues with the frame of the Mark IV, but they weren't like objectively bad issues, just little quibbles, the personal quibbles. The Mark V is, I think it's a better frame than the Mark IV. Got a metal front end here. The metal front end goes all the way to the back. It's got 30 millimeter electronics, which I think for a 5-inch is desirable. The Nazgul Evoke has 20 millimeter electronics, and I think they're very well made, and I haven't heard any stories of them blowing up. But just in general, I am about 20 millimeter electronics on a 5-inch. So is this better than the Evoke? Hard to say. But I don't think it's a bad choice. And I should probably go fly it and get a better opinion. But there you go. What about you guys? You guys flown the Mark V? Is it good? Ooh. Proximia FPV. That's a great idea for a video. I should make that video. What about DJI etiquette? Ooh. So the main difference with DJI, Justin A points out, Drone Camp said the GEP-RC Mark V was good. That's true. I'm not going to say anymore. I mean, he is generally positive towards most products. What about DJI etiquette? The main difference with DJI is that the goggles also transmit. So with analog goggles, the pilots can cluster together and stand right next to each other. And as long as you keep the quads away, you won't get interference. But with DJI, the goggles also interfere. So if one DJI pilot plugs in his quad, sets it down, and walks over here next to you, he will start interfering with you and knock you out because his goggles are also, or her goggles are also transmitting. So with DJI, each DJI pilot needs to separate themselves from all other flying pilots by like minimum 15 or 20 feet. And maybe a little more. It depends. Which is a shame because it's nice to, you got all your stuff on the table, you're standing around, and then you go to fly and you're like, bye! You got to leave. This kind of sucks. The best etiquette for DJI pilots when flying with analog pilots is to go from 50 to down to 25 megabits per second. Otherwise, you take up a huge chunk of the band and you're knocking them out of the air. With 25 megabits per second, you're basically the same width as one analog frequency, and which is obviously nicer. And if possible, reduce your output power so you interfere less, but a lot of people don't want to do that. Madstech points out that the air unit powers on at a full 1200 milliwatts on channel 8 for a few seconds before it jumps to the present channel. Is it always at 1200 milliwatts, Madstech? I thought the air unit in the Vista would stay at low power until they actually connected with the quad. I have no verification of that. That was my understanding, though. Good question, Proximia. How many can fly DJI together? I mean, easily 7 if they're on 25 megabits per second. And then the 8th one will be on the public channel, which is not the best, but you can get 8. Cell therapy. Thank you for a $5 super chat. Seeing your Cinewhoop video, and I was thinking about building one, but I want something small enough for a backpack. Uses iNav and can carry a Hero 9. Oh, well, you know, don't ask for anything difficult. If you want a Cinewhoop that can carry a Hero 9 comfortably, my opinion is that you're best suited with a 3.5 inch, but a 3 inch could do it. I would be probably leaning towards a 3.5 inch, though, to get the best results. As far as using iNav, that's tougher. What Cinewhoops have flight controllers that can run iNav? I mean, if you're talking about building your own, then you can pick your own flight controller. Like the Holybro 20mm stack could be a good choice. Pretty sure Holybro flight controllers support iNav. What is a good flight controller for a Cinewhoop that also supports iNav? Family Guyver points out the iFlight ProTech 35. I think he said he wants to build, though. If he wants to build, does the ProTech 35 support iNav? ProTech 35 with the Beast F7 says Athix. The Flywoo F745 is a good choice. He wants to build his own and only wants it for altitude hold. Well, we're getting a lot of suggestions here in the chat. I think you should build 3.5 inch for a Hero 9. 3 inch can do it, but 3.5 inch is going to give you better flight time. We're going to be looking at something like a 2204 motor, I think. Or maybe a 2104. Justin A is suggesting the Luminaire QAV Pro 5-inch whoop. I think that's going to be too much. He wants it to be able to fit in his backpack. So a 5-inch I think is going to be overkill. Ewan Gwyn wants to know, can you make a video about how to make a tiny whoop in 2022? Yeah. Step 1, buy a bind and fly tiny whoop. Step 2, change the motors if you feel like it. There's no reason to build your own like Cinewhoop from parts. Does anybody really do that? Obviously somebody does it. Cinewhoop guys, does anybody really do that? Like, okay, like Nate Payne makes his own Cinewhoops from parts Like, I don't think anybody would call him normal, right? In general, it feels to me like most Cinewhoop guys buy like a Mobula 6, and then like they may tweak it out, they may change the canopy or change the motors, but in general, I think you're not just building them from scratch. Most people would just buy a Mobula 6 or something like that and then modify it. Ciati, okay, maybe it's more common than I thought. Oh, I'm sorry. Jory FPV points out, I'm saying Cinewhoop. I meant to say Tiny Whoop. I apologize, guys. I got my wires crossed. What I meant to ask is does anybody build Tiny Whoops? Penguins can fly. I did not forget you, my friend. Penguins can fly. Thanks for a €5 super chat. Could you explain the difference between TBS Agent X, M, and Lite? Okay. TBS Agent X is a PC-based tool. See right here, TBS Agent X? It runs on your computer, and it is used to flash firmware and change configuration on TBS stuff. Okay? That's TBS Agent X. TBS Agent M is the same thing, but it is web-based instead of PC-based app. And currently, TBS Agent X has a problem, and don't use it. Use TBS Agent M. But again, the function of this is to flash firmware and configure TBS devices. Okay? TBS Agent Lite is a Lua script that runs on your radio, which is used to configure TBS devices, but not flash them. Okay. That's the answer. TBS Agent M. Yeah, Jason, GMI Visuals. M is for mobile, for use on your phones. Sure. The Great Gamer 555, interesting question. If you increase your range with better antennas, does that also interfere with the signals the government sets laws for that limit your output? So the Great Gamer, the short answer to your question is there are restrictions on output power, and those restrictions on output power also take into account your antenna gain. So for Wi-Fi devices, there's one output power that you can have if you have an omnidirectional antenna, and if you have a directional antenna, you actually are allowed more output power with a Wi-Fi device because that more directional antenna narrows down the signal and therefore you don't interfere as much. The takeaway, though, is with FPV transmitters is that you're operating as a ham radio in the USA, and your allowed output power as a ham radio operator is so high. I don't think that there's any restriction on the use of high gain antennas. So basically, I think that the FCC thinks that our video transmitters need to stay under 1 watt because they're going to be used for telecommand of a radio control model. They consider video transmission to be telecommand, and so the limited output power is 1 watt. But I don't believe that limit cares about the antenna gain. As long as you're under 1 watt from the VTX, I think you're okay. I take that with a grain of salt because I actually haven't dove into this very deeply because in general, no one cares. Sorry. In general, people just use their output power, their video transmitter. They use whatever antenna they want. A lot of them don't even have a ham license, and no one cares, and no one enforces it, and life goes on. So I just don't think about it very much. Gingerflow wants to know, what channels should 4 analog pilots use to separate the best? So you should be on race band, and you would evenly space the channels as best you could. So with 4 pilots, you would do race band 1, 3, 5, and 7. Or 1, 3, 5, and 8. Besher Bankasli asks, if the gyro in the flight controller is broken, can we use an external gyro or bypass the gyro? No. I don't know any way to use an external gyro. You could desolder the MCU or the IMU and put a new one on, perhaps. But no, you can't use an external gyro as far as I know. And there is no way to bypass the gyro. You have to, beta flight will not work. It will not arm the quad if it thinks the gyro doesn't exist. Kenny Kobe is upset that I'm not getting his question. But I see him being upset. Do you think the DJI dongle will ever be supported by FPV? What is a DJI dongle? I don't actually even know what that is. Let me search for DJI dongle. I don't know what the DJI dongle is. So I couldn't say. Is that what is the DJI dongle, Kenny? Jose Navarro wants to know, what's the most fun and reliable 1S freestyle quad you've flown? The Flywoo 1S Baby Nano is on my radar, looking for quality components. Yeah, Jose, I don't know. The problem is that, like, especially in Tiny Whoops, like, nothing is, like, super reliable. So, like, some stuff's better than other stuff, but if you want me to really, like, give you like something I would vouch for being reliable, like kind of hesitate. For freestyle, okay, here's what I would say, Jose. If you wanted me to recommend to you a 1S freestyle quad, I would steer you toward a 3-inch toothpick. And I would say buy the stuff from FPV Cycle, the FPV Cycle flight controller, the FPV Cycle motors, and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the only 1S quad that I actually enjoy doing freestyle on is a toothpick. Yes, you can freestyle a Tiny Whoop. People do it. I don't find that to be very fun, and I think that you have to work too hard around the limitations of the platform. But I think a 1S 1S toothpick, 3-inch props, 13 millimeter FPV Cycle motors, and a 1S Bob. That toothpick flight controller that Bob sells at FPV Cycle was delayed for so long because they wouldn't meet his standards of manufacturing. So that's what I would steer you towards, Jose. Kenny Kobe says, never mind. Okay, Kenny. No problem. Oh, and Peeker says 1S is rubbish. More HP, more smiles. 1S Baby Tooth is pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Gotta say. It's pretty fun. Clinton Edmondson asks, does anybody know what the minimum PWM is for the T-Motor Ultra F55 96K ESC? Thank you for a €5 or £5. Oh, my bad. £5. That's gotta hurt. £5 super chat. Does anybody know what the minimum PWM is for the T-Motor Ultra F55A? I know somebody who I don't know that. I don't know that. What's the minimum PWM for? Does anybody in the chat know? Does anybody have that ESC? Ooh, the Crux 3. Happy Model Crux 3 is a good choice. Yep, that's true. Emax Nanohawk X, also a good choice. Daniel Harmon wants to know, can you add a pause feature to a Nazgul like the DJI FPV has, where you hit a button and it freezes in air? No. Betaflight doesn't support that at all. Even if you add a GPS, Betaflight doesn't support that at all. Serenity FPV says, Clinton Edmondson, that it is 16K for the minimum on that. I don't know if that's true, but that's more information than we had at the beginning of the live stream, so let's go with it. Let's see here. Elephant454 wants to know, I've been wondering about the SkyZone Sky04X's quadversity when using two rapid mix modules. The video demos look great, but not a lot of people have talked about it. Why do you think that is? Elephant, I think that most people using the Sky04X don't use quadversity because they have to buy a second rapid mix module and they just don't bother. That's the answer, in my opinion. The performance of the rapid mix module is good enough for a lot of people, and people just don't bother to buy a second one to slap it in there. Pacific Northwest pilots, you are right that quadversity only works with the steady view receivers and not with just a standard like a rapid fire or a fusion. That is correct. Bobby Baggs, the T-Motor F55 Ultra can do at least 96K. We know that. We want to know the minimum, Bobby. Does it go to 16 or 24? That's the question, I think. King Romulus, thank you so much for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Thank you for helping me get me in the air and stay there. Michael Massey, if you're in the United States, you need to take the trust test before you fly, the FAA trust test. So you got to look that up. They want you, I mean, if you want to, like, obey the law, which, loser. I'm joking. You got to take the trust test, and then you got to go to FAA Drone Zone. Who thought that up? And you got to register yourself and register your drone. And then, technically, you also need a ham license to fly FPV. If you want to be a good little citizen and obey all the rules. Daniel Harmon, Betaflight doesn't have a loiter mode. That is correct. You would need iNav or Pixhawk for that. iNav or RG Pilot. Pixhawk, yeah. Rai Hyman wants to know Lumineer Axie HD1 versus the iFlight Crystal Patch. Which one do you like? So let's put those up on screen and compare them. Let's see. We want a combo set, right? We want it to include... Okay. Yeah, we want it to include the Omni antennas too, so we're getting a fair comparison. No. Yeah. Left hand. Okay. Short antennas. Yep. So the first thing let's do is let's compare the specs of the two systems. And we're specifically going to look for the antenna gain and the axial ratio. Those are the two main specs we're most concerned with. The antenna gain for the Crystal is 9 dBi. The gain for the Lumineer is 8.4 dBi. Same as makes no difference. The Lumineer doesn't seem to publish the axial ratio, which is fine. The axial ratio is kind of... doesn't say. I wonder why they don't say. They published the axial ratio for the stubbies. 1.6 is not a spectacular axial ratio, but, you know, I wonder why they're not publishing it for the AXI HD V2. Well, anyway. So I would say the specs of these antennas are almost identical in terms of their gain and their coverage pattern. It's likely to be the same. Let's check the beam width. 76 by 76, 105 by 75. Okay, something doesn't add up there. If they have the same gain, they can't have the same gain, but one of them has 105 degree by 75 and one has 75 by 75. That's not possible. That doesn't seem possible. Maybe there's something I'm missing there. Well, the radiation efficiency is very similar as well. 93 versus 95%. Almost the same. Something doesn't add up here. I don't know how to interpret what they're doing with the beam width. One thing, they are really sure that beam width is circular. iFlight doesn't seem to publish a coverage diagram. Does it? Oh, here we go. Oh, man. I'm so wrecked right now. Nice. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, I think iFlight's spec is wrong. They look like they're both about 75 by 75 beam width. So they're the same beam width. Now, one difference. And I apologize, we spent a lot of time talking about the coverage pattern, but obviously that's like, this doesn't seem right. How do you claim a horizontal width of 105? Oh, at 9 dB. That's not how anyone does it. Why are you doing it at 9 dB? That's not how you do antenna gain. You do it at 3 dB. Okay, that explains it, sort of. The other difference with the AXI is the AXI has up tilt in the antenna. The crystal does not. So the AXI up tilts by some degrees so that as you drop your head, it still points straight out. Or if you keep your head up, it tilts upwards. That's kind of cool. However, the AXI is significantly more expensive. Significantly more expensive. $56 versus $80. That's a lot of money. I mean, it's not like the end of the world, but it's a lot of money. And I think that the Crystal HD looks better, especially in the black carbon. It has a more standard look, whereas the AXI, they made it clear, and I'm not sure why they did that. I mean, some people are going to really think this looks cool, but I think it kind of looks, I don't know why they did that. I would much rather have a cool carbon look. Do you really want your goggles to look like that? I don't know. Put some LEDs in there and shit, right? That would be cool. I guess. So, performance-wise, about the same. The AXI has up tilt built in. The Crystal does not. In my opinion, the Crystal looks better and is less expensive. I would go with the Crystal if I were spending my own money. All right. The patch antenna, Kenny Kobe. The patch antenna should be on bottom. The Omni should be on top. That was confirmed by Wesley Vardy testing. Omni on top. Thank you, Kai Savage. Thanks for all the content you supply. You've helped me tremendously this past year since getting into FPV. Thank you so much, Kai Savage, for the $20 super chat. Very generous. Hello, One Left. One Left says, hi from Russia. Hi, One Left. Glad to have you here. Your internet's still working over there? I feel for Russian people in general and Russian FPV pilots in specific. Y'all think your shit's expensive. You buying in rubles. You got a lot of problems today. I mean, like, a lot of people in the world have problems. This is hardly the biggest one. And the effect of on the Russian economy is inability to buy FPV gear is hardly going to be at the top of people's list. Don't get me wrong. But one left. I salute you, sir. Does that go for the V2 goggles? Yes. Bearded Paddler. Patch on bottom, Omnis on top. V1 or V2, doesn't matter. Again, this is Wesley Vardy. The takeaway, my understanding is that having them higher up helps more than anything else. But Wesley Vardy tested both the V1 and the V2. GMI Visuals. Oh, wow, that's a tough question, GMI Visuals. What would HC0 need for you to leave your DJI goggles behind? So, GMI Visuals, let me take that question a little bit of a different direction. What do I think is the most realistic scenario where I would, like, abandon DJI permanently? In 2 years, could I envision a scenario where no one is manufacturing DJI FPV video transmitters? Yeah. I'm not saying I think that's likely. I'm just saying that right now, Caddx isn't making VTXs. They never have. They're making cameras. RunCam is making cameras. But the VTXs still come straight from DJI. And I think that they always will. And so I can imagine a world where DJI says, we're tired of making these VTXs. We're tired of FPV. We're moving on. DJI does that. They come out with products. The product, maybe it's successful, maybe it's not. And then they move on. And sometimes they just drop the product. And it seems like a day could come where DJI drops the FPV line. At which point, the FPV pilots will no longer be able to get those products. At which point, you're going to be looking for alternatives. And HD0 would be high on my list. Because it's going to be hard to go back to analog. Not that I don't fly analog, but yeah. HD0 can't deliver resolution and penetration like DJI because the fundamental technology of HD0 is different. The way that they transmit the data is different. And the advantage of HD0 is low and consistent latency. But I think the balance DJI struck between latency and resolution is actually very, very good. And so I'm not sure what HD0 could do without fundamentally redefining their technology in a way that's not possible. To make me go, nah, I'm going to fly HD0 instead of DJI on all my quads. That's my take. The strength of HD0 is their devotion and connection to the FPV community. DJI is like the really hot person who barely knows you exist. And we all just simp for DJI, don't we? Right? DJI's just out there not even reading. DJI's not even reading our super chats, are they? They're just out there doing their hot stream, and we are just all simping in the comments and hoping we get the scraps. And HD0 is the streamer who reads every damn chat and knows you exist and works to earn your views. And everybody simps for the hot girl, don't they? So that's what HD0 has going for it. They are hungry in a way that DJI isn't. They want us to use them in a way that DJI kind of doesn't care. That's my opinion. And the latency thing. Also the latency. Drone Video Switzerland, thanks for 10 Swiss francs. Just want to say thanks for all the videos from you. Learned a lot from your channel, and thanks. Thank you so much. Drone Video Switzerland. Money, no problem. Would you tell a beginner to go DJI or HD0, T-Bird FPV? Well, first of all, the price of the two systems is actually very similar. So money doesn't really differentiate them. I would steer them toward DJI. I mean, DJI is extremely robust, widely available. Hardware is very reliable. Image quality is great. Easy to use, easy to set up, no nonsense. And generally just freaking works. I'm sorry, I don't want to. I feel bad because like people keep trying to get me to compare DJI to HD0 in specific ways, and there are ways in which HD0 excels. But the ways that you guys are asking me about are not the ways that HD0 excels. And so now I'm gonna have to go to my Facebook comments and hear people say I shit on HD0 too much. And that's not true. I've said a million positive things about them, but I got to be realistic. When you ask me, you know, what about this situation? There are situations in which HD0 is clearly the right choice, but there are also situations in which I think is clearly not. So you guys keep asking me about those. Guys, we are 3 minutes to the end of the stream. Aaron Ciotti is in the chat, and he is going to be streaming at 3 p.m. when I get out of here. Ciotti is going to start posting the link to his stream, and you guys can check that out. We got one more super chat from Freelojo FPV. Thank you for a $5 super chat, Freelojo. No, not that one. Good point, but no. Why is that not in the chat window? Why is it not? Reload. Something up with this stupid chat window. Nope. Why would it not be there? Lame. Freelojo wants to know suggestions on bed temp for TPU, textured removable magnetic bed. Oh Lord. I mean, you just have to. I'm sorry, man. I can't answer that question. You have to look at your TPU that you bought, and it will have a suggested temperature range on the outside of the box. And that's where you're going to start in roughly the middle of that range. And then you got to just work it out, what temp works best. I think I run TPU at like 206, but that's why people run temp towers, is to find the best temperature. It's going to depend on so many factors. Your machine, so start at roughly the middle of the range that's printed on the box and go from there. 70C. Oh, I'm sorry, bed temp, not nozzle temp. Apologies. Bed temp, that's my bad. Bed temp, somewhere around like 60 or 70 Celsius, I think is a good start for his TPU. People saying they go as low as 50. Go figure. For a textured bed, it's going to stick better. You may be able to use a lower temp. Cloud Deck FPV, I believe the AG01 gimbals for the Zorro are a done deal, but I don't have an update on it. I haven't gotten them. Oh my God, it's 3 p.m. It's time to get the hell out of here. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me throughout the chat. I will see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Everybody have a great day, and Ciotti, have a great stream. I'm out of here. Happy flying, everybody.